Admiral Park stood at the window of his office and looked at the stars. He was 63 years old now. His hair had turned gray. His eyes were tired, but his memory was sharp, and that was his curse. 300 years ago, humanity had met the first aliens. They came to Earth in massive ships that blocked out the sun. They were tall creatures with gray skin and 4 arms. Their eyes were cold and black like the space between stars. They looked at humans the way a man looks at insects. They told humanity that they now belonged to the Galactic Council. There were rules to follow, treaties to sign. Humans could travel the stars, but only in certain areas. Humans could trade, but only for certain goods. Humans could live, but only if they stayed quiet and small. And humanity accepted. They had no choice. The ships could destroy Earth in hours. So humans smiled and nodded and signed every treaty. They became the galaxy's quiet neighbor, the species that never caused trouble, the species that always said yes. Had grown up hearing stories about this. His grandfather had been a young man when they came. He remembered the fear. He remembered the shame, but he also remembered hope. "We will grow stronger," his grandfather had told him. "We will learn, and one day we will stand as equals." That day never came. Joined the Earth Defense Fleet when he was 20. He was smart and brave, and he rose through the ranks quickly. By 40, he was an admiral. By 50, he commanded the entire fleet. It should have been an honor. Instead, it felt like a joke. Earth's fleet was small. The Council allowed them only 50 warships. They had 10,000. Any fight would be over in minutes. So his job was not to fight. His job was to watch, to document, to file complaints. He had filed 712 complaints in his career. When they burned the human colony on 7, he filed a complaint. 3,000 people died. The Council called it a territorial correction and did nothing. When the consortium took 30,000 human miners as slaves on the outer stations of Titan, he filed a complaint. The Council called it labor redistribution and did nothing. When ships attacked human trading vessels in neutral space, killing hundreds, he filed a complaint. The Council expressed concern and did nothing. 712 times had asked for justice. 712 times he had been ignored. His daughter, Park, used to tell him that things would change. She was an optimist like her grandfather. She believed in diplomacy. She believed that if humans just kept talking, kept being patient, the galaxy would eventually see them as equals. Was 35 years old. She had 2 children, a boy named Minu who was 7 and a girl named Sarah who was 4. Loved them more than anything in the universe. When his wife died 5 years ago, those 3 became his whole world. And the children lived on Mars, but they visited Earth often. They had been planning to come for his birthday next month. Had sent him a video message 2 weeks ago. Little Sarah was learning to read. Little Minu wanted to be an admiral like his grandfather. They were happy. They were safe. They boarded the passenger liner Chrysanthemum on a Tuesday morning. The Chrysanthemum was a beautiful ship. It carried 12,000 passengers between Mars and Earth. Families, workers, students, children. It had no weapons. It flew through space that every treaty said was safe. They destroyed it anyway. A single warship appeared from nowhere. It did not send a warning. It did not make demands. It simply opened fire. The Chrysanthemum broke apart in seconds. 12,000 people died in the cold darkness of space. Among them were Park Minu and Park Sora. Learned the news from a young officer who could not meet his eyes. The officer spoke the words, but did not really hear them. He felt something break inside him. Something that had been holding together for 63 years finally shattered. He walked to his desk. He sat down. He looked at the form for complaint 713. It was already prepared. All he had to do was sign it and send it. The Council would receive it. They would read it. They would do nothing. Picked up the form. He looked at it for a long time. Then slowly he tore it in half. He stood up and walked out of his office. His staff tried to speak to him, but he did not stop. He walked through the corridors of Fleet Command and out into the city. He walked through streets full of people who did not yet know what had happened. He walked until he reached the United Earth Parliament building. The guards recognized him. They let him in without questions. He walked into the main chamber where the representatives of Earth sat. They were discussing something. Trade agreements, probably, or maybe another treaty with the Council. It did not matter. Stood at the entrance and waited. One by one, the representatives noticed him. They stopped talking. The room became silent. "Admiral Park," said the Speaker of Parliament, "this is unexpected. Is something wrong?" Looked at them. These were the people who had spent 300 years bowing. These were the people who had signed away humanity's pride, humanity's freedom, humanity's future. These were the people who believed that peace was worth any price. He had believed it too once. He did not believe it anymore. "They have destroyed the passenger liner Chrysanthemum," he said. His voice was steady. 12,000 civilians are dead. Among them was my daughter. Among them were my. The room erupted in noise. Shock, horror, anger. The representatives shouted questions, waited until they were quiet again. "I have filed 712 complaints to the Galactic Council," he continued. "Nothing has changed. Nothing will ever change. They do not see us as equals. They see us as prey. And prey that keeps asking politely to not be eaten will always be eaten." He walked forward until he stood in the center of the chamber. "I am not here to file complaint 713. I am here to tell you that we are done asking. We are done begging. We are done being patient." He looked at each representative in turn. "I am asking you to declare war." The room was silent. No one had ever said those words before. Humanity had never gone to war with another species. The idea seemed insane, suicidal, that would crush them. But something had changed. The news of the chrysanthemum spread through the building, through the city, through the planet. People who had accepted 300 years of shame suddenly felt something new, not fear, anger. One representative stood up, then another, then another. They did not speak. They did not need to. Their faces said everything. The vote was unanimous. For the first time in human history, Earth proclaimed total war against the Dominion. The message went out to every human ship, every human colony, every human in the galaxy. It was simple. We are done asking. We are coming. Across the stars, the high marshals heard the news. They laughed. They raised glasses of expensive wine and toasted to an easy victory. Humanity had 50 ships. They had 10,000. This would not be a war. It would be an execution. The consortium heard the news and made bets on how many days humanity would survive. The smart money said 2 weeks. Other species heard the news and shook their heads. Poor humans. They had finally snapped. It was sad, really. They had been a nice species, quiet, friendly, good at medicine and engineering, but now they would be destroyed and the galaxy would forget they ever existed. None of them understood what they had awakened. Admiral Park returned to Fleet Command that night. His officers looked at him with new eyes. They were scared. They were excited. They were ready. Sat at his desk and began to plan. For 300 years, humanity had been watching, learning, preparing for a day they hoped would never come. That day had come. The thought they were fighting a small, weak species that had finally lost its mind. They were wrong. They were fighting 300 years of suppressed rage. They were fighting a species that had spent centuries studying every weakness, every flaw, every vulnerability of its oppressors. They were fighting humans. And humans, when they finally decided to fight, did not stop until they won. Looked at the stars through his window. Somewhere out there, in the cold darkness, his daughter, and floated among the wreckage of the chrysanthemum. "I will make this mean something," he whispered. "I promise." The war had begun. Lieutenant had never killed anyone before the war. She had spent her whole life studying aliens, not fighting them. Her job was to understand other species, to find ways to communicate with them, to build bridges between worlds. She believed in peace. That was before the chrysanthemum. That was before the war. That was before she learned what she was capable of. Now she crouched in the darkness of a crashed transport ship on the fortress world of 9. Around her, 23 soldiers waited in silence. They were dirty. They were wounded. They were surrounded by enemies, and they were absolutely not going to surrender. The mission had been simple on paper: drop behind lines, destroy the power station that fed their planetary shields, get out before the enemy knew what happened. Simple. Nothing in war is simple. They had been waiting for them. Someone had talked, or maybe they had just gotten lucky. Either way, this team of 50 had walked into a trap. They fought their way through 3 enemy positions before reaching the power station. They destroyed it, but by then, only 23 of them were still alive. Now they were trapped in the wreckage of their transport ship, surrounded by 500 soldiers. The enemy knew they were here. They were just waiting for the right moment to attack. Looked at her soldiers. They were young. Most of them had never seen combat before the war. Now they had blood on their hands and death in their eyes. War changed people. She had learned that quickly. "Lieutenant," whispered Sergeant No, her second in command. He was a big man with a scar across his face. Before the war, he had been a construction worker. Now he was one of the deadliest soldiers in the human fleet. "Commander is sending a message. They want to talk." Nodded, she activated her communicator and listened. The commander's voice was cold and mechanical. Their translation devices made all their voices sound the same. "Human soldiers," he said, "you are surrounded. You cannot escape. Your mission has failed. Surrender now and you will be treated as prisoners of war. Continue to resist and you will all die. You have 5 minutes to decide." Looked at her soldiers again, 23 people. Some of them were barely adults. They had families waiting for them back home. They had lives they wanted to live. If they surrendered, they might survive. They might keep their word, or they might not. They had never been known for keeping promises. But that was not the real question. The real question was simpler. What kind of species were humans going to be? Sergeant No said quietly, "How many explosives do we have left?" No checked his pack. "Enough to bring down this whole section of the building, maybe 3 levels." "And how many are in those 3 levels?" No's eyes widened as he understood what she was asking. "Hundreds, Lieutenant, maybe more." Nodded slowly. "Get everyone ready, we're going to blow this position." "But Lieutenant," one of the young soldiers said, "if we do that, we'll be buried too." Looked at him. He was barely 20 years old. His name was, and he had a girlfriend back on Earth who was waiting for him. Had seen her picture. A pretty girl with a bright smile. "Yes," said, "we might be or we might not. Either way, we take them with us. Either way, we don't surrender." The soldier stared at her. Then slowly he nodded. There was something new in his eyes, not fear, understanding. They did not understand this. That was their weakness. They fought wars like accountants. They calculated acceptable losses. They measured risk against reward. If a battle cost more than it gained, they retreated. If surrender offered better odds than fighting, they surrendered. It was logical. It was sensible. It was how civilized species fought. Humans were not civilized. Humans were something older, something more dangerous. People had spent thousands of years fighting each other. They had fought wars over land, over religion, over ideas, over nothing at all. They had learned things about violence that they could not imagine. They had learned that sometimes winning was not the point. Sometimes the point was making sure your enemy knew that fighting you would always cost more than it was worth. 5 minutes are up, Lieutenant, Sergeant No said. Stood up, she activated her communicator again. "Commander," she said, "this is Lieutenant of the Earth Defense Force. I have a counteroffer for you." There was a pause. "We are listening, human." Withdraw your forces, let us leave, and you might survive the day." The commander made a sound that might have been laughter. "You are surrounded by 500 soldiers. You have 23. You are offering us terms." "Yes," said. "Because in 30 seconds I am going to detonate enough explosives to collapse 3 levels of this building. My soldiers and I might die, but we will take every single in this section with us. 500 of your soldiers will die today. And when the next human team comes, and the next, and the next, you will learn that fighting us always costs more than you can afford." Silence. "You are bluffing," the commander said, but there was something new in his voice. Doubt. 10 seconds, said. "This is madness. No species destroys itself to win a battle." 5 seconds. "Wait. Press the button." The world turned to fire and thunder. The floor dropped away beneath her feet. Walls collapsed. Soldiers screamed. Felt herself falling through darkness and noise and pain. Then nothing. She woke up an unknown time later. Her body hurt everywhere. She could taste blood in her mouth. Dust filled her lungs, but she was alive. Slowly, painfully, she pushed herself up from the rubble. Around her she heard groaning. Voices. Her soldiers were alive, some of them at least. "Sound off," she croaked. "Who's still breathing?" One by one, voices answered. 17. 17 of her 23 soldiers had survived. They were wounded. They were buried under tons of wreckage, but they were alive. They were not so lucky. The collapse had done exactly what it planned. 3 levels of enemy positions were gone. Hundreds of soldiers were dead or trapped. The survivors were too shocked, too damaged to continue the fight. "Lieutenant," Sergeant No said. He was bleeding from a wound on his head, but he was grinning. "I think we won." Started to laugh. It hurt her broken ribs, but she could not stop. They had won. 23 humans against 500, and they had won. She organized her people. They dug themselves out of the rubble. They found their wounded and carried them. They walked out of that collapsed building into the light of an alien sun, and they did not look back. Word spread quickly. The Battle of 9 became legendary. The story of Lieutenant and her 23 soldiers who had faced impossible odds and chosen to bring the sky down rather than surrender. The commanders began to understand something terrible. Humans did not fight like other species. Humans did not calculate acceptable losses. Humans got angry, and angry humans would burn the whole galaxy down before they admitted defeat. In orbit above 9, Captain was learning the same lesson. Commanded the destroyer Vanguard. It was a small ship, barely armed, nothing compared to the battle cruisers that filled the sky, but had something they did not have. He had rage. His wife had been on the Chrysanthemum, his 2 sons, his parents. Everyone he loved had died in that ship. When he heard the news, something inside him had gone quiet and cold. He did not cry. He did not scream. He just waited. Now the moment had come. The Vanguard was dying. 3 ships had surrounded it. The engines were failing. The weapons were offline. The shields were gone. Had maybe 5 minutes before his ship broke apart. His crew looked at him with fear in their eyes. They were waiting for him to give the order to surrender, or to abandon ship, or to do something sensible. Looked at the command ship on his screen. It was huge, beautiful in a cold way, the flagship of the fleet. If it fell, the whole position would collapse. "Navigation," he said calmly. "Set a collision course for the enemy flagship." His navigation officer stared at him. "Sir." "You heard me, full speed." "Captain, we can't wheel." "Full speed," repeated. His voice was quiet, steady, terrifying. The officer obeyed. The Vanguard turned toward the flagship and accelerated. It was a small ship, fast. They did not realize what was happening until it was too late. Opened a communication channel. He wanted them to hear this. He wanted the whole galaxy to hear this. "You killed children," he said. "You killed my children, remember that." The Vanguard struck the flagship at full speed. The explosion was visible from the planet's surface. Both ships disappeared in a ball of fire that lit up the sky like a second sun. Captain died instantly. So did 3,000 officers. The fleet lost its command. The remaining ships panicked, scattered, ran. Human reinforcements arrived hours later to find the incomplete retreat. 9. The fortress world that was supposed to stop the human advance fell in 9 hours. 9 hours. The High Command received the reports and could not believe them. This was impossible. Humans were weak. Humans were soft. Humans did not fight like this. But they were fighting like this. Across 100 battlefields, humans were doing the impossible. They were winning fights they should have lost. They were taking casualties that should have broken them, and they kept coming. The galaxy had spent 300 years teaching humanity that power was all that mattered, that the strong took what they wanted, and the weak accepted what they were given. Humanity had learned the lesson well. Now they were teaching it back. And the galaxy was beginning to be afraid. The Galactic Council Chamber was the largest room in the known universe. It floated in space at the center of neutral territory, a massive station where representatives from 47 species came to discuss the fate of civilizations. The walls showed holographic images of distant stars. The ceiling was transparent, revealing the endless darkness of space. It was designed to make everyone feel small, to remind them that they were just tiny creatures in an infinite universe. Ambassador Bay had never felt small in her life. She was 54 years old, a small woman with gray hair tied back in a simple knot. She had been a diplomat for 30 years. She had smiled at aliens who despised her species. She had signed treaties that benefited everyone except humanity. She had bowed and scraped and apologized for things that were not her fault. She was done with all of that now. The council chamber was full. Representatives from every major species had come to witness this moment. The delegate stood at his platform, his 4 arms crossed in anger. The representatives whispered among themselves, their insect-like faces impossible to read. The hegemony, the republic, the clans, everyone was here. They had called this emergency session to discuss human aggression, the wanted sanctions, the wanted intervention. They wanted the council to stop this war before it spread any further. Found it amusing. For 300 years, humanity had begged the council for help. Now the council was begging humanity to stop. Ambassador Bay, the council speaker said. He was a tall creature with blue skin and silver eyes. His voice echoed through the chamber. You have been called here to answer for your species' actions. The Dominion has filed a formal complaint against Earth. They accuse you of unprovoked aggression, destruction of civilian infrastructure, and crimes against galactic peace. Did not respond immediately. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of every representative. Some looked away. Some stared back. None of them seemed comfortable. Good. Unprovoked aggression, she said finally. Her voice was calm, almost friendly. That is an interesting choice of words. May I ask the delegate a question? The delegate shifted on his platform. You may. 3 months ago, a warship destroyed the passenger liner Chrysanthemum. 12,000 human civilians died. Children died. Was that unprovoked aggression? The delegate's cold eyes flickered. That was a tragic misunderstanding. Our ship believed the liner was carrying weapons. It was not. We have apologized for the error. No, said, you have not. You expressed regret at the loss of life. You did not apologize. You did not offer compensation. You did not punish the captain who gave the order. You did nothing. The chamber was silent. Continued. 15 years ago, forces burned the human colony on 7. 3,000 people died. This council called it a territorial correction. Was that unprovoked aggression? No answer. 23 years ago, the consortium enslaved 30,000 human miners on the outer stations of Titan. This council called it labor redistribution. Shall I continue? I have 300 years of examples. The delegate made an angry clicking sound. Those events are not relevant to. They are completely relevant, said. Her voice was still calm, but there was steel underneath it now. For 300 years we came to this council seeking justice. We followed your rules. We signed your treaties. We asked nicely. We begged. We humiliated ourselves in front of species who saw us as nothing more than prey. She stepped forward, her small figure somehow commanding the attention of the entire chamber. And what did we receive? Nothing, less than nothing. You watched our people die and called it politics. You watched our colonies burn and called it territorial disputes. You taught us very clearly that in this galaxy only strength matters, only power is respected, only violence is heard. She paused, letting her words settle. Congratulations, we learned. The chamber erupted in noise. Delegates shouted at each other. The demanded action, the called for human isolation. But beneath the noise noticed something interesting. Not everyone was shouting. The delegates sat quietly, watching her with something that might have been respect. They were nodding among themselves. Even some of them looked thoughtful rather than angry. She remembered something her grandfather had told her when she was young. Always be kind to everyone you meet, he had said. You never know when you might need a friend. Humanity had spent 300 years being kind. They had sent doctors to cure alien plagues when no one else would help. They had sent engineers to stabilize failing space stations. They had negotiated peace between warring clans and asked nothing in return. At the time, it had seemed foolish, weak, a waste of resources. Now, watching the divisions in the council chamber, understood. Her grandfather had not been weak, he had been wise. The representative stood up. Her species was small, with delicate features and large, intelligent eyes. They had nearly been wiped out 40 years ago by a disease that no one could cure. No one except human scientists, who had worked for 3 years to develop a treatment. I would like to speak, they said. The chamber quieted. 40 years ago my people were dying. We asked this council for help. They said our illness was not a priority. The said intervention would be economically inefficient. We had no strategic value, so we were left to die. She looked at. The humans came anyway. They asked for nothing. They saved millions of lives. My children exist because of human kindness. She turned to face the delegate. You ask us to condemn humanity for defending themselves, after everything you have done to them. No, the Republic will not support any action against Earth. If anything, we should be asking why this council allowed things to reach this point. The delegate stood next, then the delegate from the systems, then others. One by one, species that humanity had helped over the centuries rose to speak. They did not all support human actions, but they refused to condemn them. The delegate watched this with growing fury. This is ridiculous, he snarled. The humans are a threat to galactic stability. They must be stopped. Then stop them yourself, said sweetly. You have 10,000 ships, we have 50. Surely that should be easy. The black eyes narrowed. Everyone in the chamber knew what had happened at 9. They had lost 300 ships in 9 hours. Their easy victory had turned into a nightmare. This council will regret its inaction, they said. Perhaps, replied, but I suspect you will regret your actions much sooner. She turned and walked toward the exit. The chamber watched in stunned silence. No one had ever simply walked out of a council session before. At the door, paused. She looked back at the assembled representatives of the galaxy's greatest powers. For 300 years we tried to be your friends, she said. You chose to see us as victims instead. Now you will see what we really are. She smiled. It was not a friendly smile. I suggest you stay out of our way. She left. The council session continued for hours after that. The demanded military intervention. The demanded economic sanctions. But the galaxy was no longer united against humanity. the formally declared neutrality. The clans recalled their ambassador from space. The systems quietly opened their borders to human ships. Even the hegemony, ancient allies of the, began to reconsider their position. In the weeks that followed, everything changed. Species that had ignored humanity for centuries suddenly remembered old debts, old friendships, old kindnesses. They did not join the war, not yet, but they stopped helping the trade routes closed. Supply lines stretched thin. The great war machine, designed to crush a small enemy quickly, found itself fighting alone. The consortium was the first to officially withdraw. They had made significant credits betting on humanity's quick defeat. They had lost those credits. Now they wanted nothing more than to pretend the whole thing had never happened. They quietly released the human slaves they had been holding and sent apologetic messages to Earth. Other species followed. The galaxy was reshaping itself around a simple truth. Humanity had been weak because it chose to be weak. Now it was choosing something different. Ambassador Bay returned to Earth a hero. People cheered her name in the streets. They called her the woman who had made the galaxy flinch. She accepted the praise gracefully, but privately she felt tired. She had been a diplomat for 30 years. She had believed in peace, in cooperation, in the possibility that different species could learn to respect each other. Now she had watched that dream die. The galaxy had taught humanity that peace was for the weak, that kindness was stupidity, that the only language anyone understood was violence. She hoped, when this was all over, that humanity would remember what it used to be. She hoped they would not become like the cold, cruel, taking what they wanted because they could. But that was a worry for later. Right now, there was a war to win. And humanity was winning. General Shin had spent his entire life studying war. Not modern war, the careful, calculated conflicts that alien species fought with their treaties and acceptable losses and negotiated surrenders. Real war, human war, the kind of war that had shaped his ancestors for thousands of years. He knew things that they could never understand. He knew that the side with more soldiers did not always win. He knew that strength was not the same as power. He knew that a small force, properly used, could bring down empires. They expected a defensive war. They expected humanity to huddle behind their borders, protecting what little they had, slowly being ground down by superior numbers. It was what any sensible species would do. Humans were not sensible. Launched Operation Autumn Wind on a cold morning in October. 12 carrier groups jumped simultaneously into core space, not to conquer, not yet, to hunt. The strategy was simple. They had 10,000 ships, but those ships needed fuel. They needed ammunition. They needed supplies. All of those things traveled through space on transport vessels, following predictable routes to predictable destinations. They had never bothered to protect those routes. Why would they? No one would be foolish enough to attack their heartland. Humanity was that foolish. Commander O led the stealth frigate Silent Dawn into the heart of territory. Her ship was small, barely larger than a transport vessel. It carried a crew of 83. Against the fleet it was nothing, a mosquito against a giant. But mosquitoes could be very annoying. The Silent Dawn spent 7 months behind enemy lines. They never engaged in direct combat. They did not attack battle fleets or fortress worlds. Instead, they hunted the soft targets, fuel depots that supplied distant fronts, communication relays that coordinated fleet movements, supply convoys carrying food and ammunition. They struck without warning and vanished before they could respond. They left behind burning wreckage and terrified survivors who spread stories of ghost ships appearing from nowhere. Was a small woman with short black hair and cold eyes. She had been a cargo pilot before the war, one of the countless humans who transported goods between colonies, invisible and ignored. She had always been good at being invisible. Now she used that skill to kill. Her crew learned to trust her completely. She had a gift for reading movements, for predicting where they would be weak, for finding the perfect moment to strike. In 7 months, the Silent Dawn destroyed 41 enemy ships, crippled 2 space stations, and rescued over 600 human prisoners of war. They called her the Ghost. They started telling stories about her to frighten young officers. "Check your sensors twice," they said. "The Ghost might be watching." But all ghosts are eventually found. It happened near a small moon in the home system. The Silent Dawn had been tracking a prison transport carrying 300 human captives. The plan was simple: disable the transport, rescue the prisoners, disappear. They had done it a dozen times before. This time was different. This time it was a trap. The transport was bait. As soon as the Silent Dawn revealed itself, 30 warships emerged from hiding behind the moon. They had been waiting for weeks, tracking patterns, analyzing data, hunting the hunter. Looked at the tactical display and felt something she had not felt in months: fear. Not for herself, she had made peace with death long ago, but for her crew, 83 people who had trusted her to bring them home. "Commander," her tactical officer said. His voice was steady, but she could see his hands shaking. "We're surrounded. All escape routes are blocked." "Weapon status?" "We have 12 missiles left. 3 plasma torpedoes, that's it." 12 missiles, 30 enemy ships. The math was simple. They were going to die here. The commander opened a communication channel. His voice was cold, triumphant. "Human vessel, you have been identified as the terrorist ship Silent Dawn. You are responsible for the deaths of thousands of soldiers. Surrender immediately, and your crew will be treated as prisoners of war." Muted the channel, she looked at her crew. They were watching her, waiting. Some of them were young, barely out of training. Some were veterans who had been with her since the beginning. All of them knew what surrender meant. They had a long memory. They would not be gentle. "What are your orders, Commander?" asked Lieutenant Moon, her first officer. Was 26 years old. She had a wife waiting for her back on Earth. She had never talked about it much, but had seen the pictures on her desk. Thought about the last 7 months, the ships they had destroyed, the prisoners they had rescued, the fear they had put into hearts. Whatever happened today, they had made a difference. She unmuted the channel. "Commander," she said, her voice was calm, "I have a counteroffer." There was a pause. "You are not in a position to make offers, human." "I have 12 missiles left," said. "That's enough to destroy 12 of your ships, maybe more if I'm lucky. You'll win, eventually, but you'll lose a third of your fleet doing it." She leaned forward, her eyes fixed on the screen. "Is catching 1 ghost worth losing 10 ships? 20. I'm curious what your superiors will say when you explain the casualties." Silence on the channel. Continued. "Or we can do this differently. You let us go, we disappear. You tell your commanders that the ghost escaped again, that she was too clever, too fast. No one has to die today." The commander made a harsh sound. "You expect me to believe you would simply leave, after everything you've done?" "I expect you to make a rational calculation," said. "That's what do, right? Calculate acceptable losses." "Well, calculate this. I don't care about dying. My crew doesn't care about dying. We stopped caring about that a long time ago. So if you push us, we will fight, and we will make you bleed." She smiled, though he could not see it. "The question is, do you care about dying? Do your officers? Because some of you will definitely die if this fight happens. Which ones? Who wants to be the first?" Nothing. The channel was silent. The ships held their positions, but no one moved. 30 seconds, said. Then I start shooting. 28 seconds passed. Felt her heart pounding in her chest, but her hands were steady on the controls. Her crew waited. The universe held its breath. At 29 seconds, the commander spoke. "All ships pull back, let them go." Did not hesitate. "Navigation, get us out of here, maximum speed." The Silent Dawn shot forward into the darkness. Behind them, the fleet watched in silence. No one pursued. Lieutenant Moon let out a breath she had been holding for what felt like hours. "Commander, how did you know that would work?" Was quiet for a moment. "I didn't," she admitted, "but I knew something they didn't." "What?" "They fight to win. We fight because we have nothing left to lose. That makes us unpredictable. Unpredictable is dangerous, and dangerous things are better left alone." She looked out at the stars. They have spent thousands of years being the strongest species in the galaxy. They've forgotten what it's like to be afraid. We're teaching them to remember. The Silent Dawn returned to human space 3 weeks later. Its crew were celebrated as heroes. Their story spread across the fleet, inspiring soldiers who had been losing hope, but knew the truth. They had been lucky. They were learning, adapting. The tricks that worked yesterday might not work tomorrow. The war was far from over. General Shin understood this too. Operation Autumn Wind had been devastating, but it had not won the war. They were wounded, angry, and preparing to strike back with everything they had. The next phase would be different. No more hit-and-run attacks, no more hunting in the shadows. The final battle was coming, and it would decide everything. Gathered his commanders for a final briefing. They looked at the maps, the fleet positions, the intelligence reports. The OV Prime lay at the center of enemy territory, defended by the largest fleet ever assembled. "We have one chance," said. "If we win this battle, the war ends. If we lose—" He did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. Commander O stood among the officers. Her crew had been given new ships, more soldiers, better weapons. She was no longer hunting in the shadows. She was leading a battle group. "When do we move?" she asked. Looked at his commanders. These were the people who would decide the fate of humanity. Soldiers who had given everything. Leaders who had sacrificed everything. "Tomorrow," he said, "tomorrow we end this." The room was silent. Then one by one the commanders nodded. They understood what was being asked. They accepted it. Thought about the war, the lives lost, the friends buried, the family she might never see again. She thought about and she thought about what humanity had become. Were they still the species that had sent doctors to cure alien plagues? Were they still the species that had believed in peace and cooperation? Or had they become something else, something cold and hard and dangerous? She did not know the answer, but she knew one thing: whatever they had become, they would see this through to the end. The final battle was coming, and humanity was ready. The OV Prime hung in space like a dark jewel. It was a beautiful planet, deep purple oceans, silver forests, cities that glittered like stars. 18 billion lived there. Families, children, ordinary people who had never held a weapon, who had never voted for war, who had simply been born on the wrong world at the wrong time. Admiral Park looked at that planet through the window of his command ship and felt nothing. No, that was not true. He felt tired. He felt old. He felt like a man who had walked a very long road and finally reached the end. 2 years of war, millions dead on both sides, battles fought across 1,000 worlds, and now here they were, the entire human fleet, every ship that could fly, every soldier that could fight, had gathered in orbit above Prime. The defense fleet was gone, destroyed in a final, desperate battle 3 days ago. General Shin had given his life in that battle, leading the assault that broke through the enemy lines. So had thousands of others. The cost had been terrible. But they had won. Now humanity held the sky above the 18 billion lives hung in the balance. One order from and those lives would end. Every city would burn. Every forest would turn to ash. They would be erased from the universe. It was what they deserved. That's what everyone said. After everything they had done, the chrysanthemum, the colonies, the centuries of cruelty, they deserved to burn. Thought about his daughter, with her gentle smile and her belief in peace. He thought about Minu and Sara, who had barely begun to live before they were taken from him. He had started this war for them. He had fought for 2 years to reach this moment. And now that the moment was here, he did not know what to do. "Admiral," said Captain Han, his aide. She was a young woman with serious eyes and a calm voice. She had been with him since the beginning of the war. "The fleet is awaiting your orders. All weapons are ready." Nodded slowly. "What about communications?" "We've received a message from the High Council. They're begging for terms." "What terms?" "Unconditional surrender. They'll accept anything. They just want us to spare the planet." Was quiet for a long moment. The bridge was silent. Every officer watched him, waiting. They had fought so hard to reach this moment. They wanted to see the burn. They had earned that right. Hadn't they? "Open a channel," said finally. "To everyone, every ship, every world in the galaxy. I want them all to hear this." Hesitated, "Sir." "Do it." She nodded and worked her controls. A moment later, his voice was being broadcast across the stars to human ships, to cities, to every species watching this moment. He took a deep breath. "This is Admiral Park of the Earth Defense Fleet," he said. "We have one." He paused, letting the words settle. 2 years ago, they destroyed a passenger ship called the Chrysanthemum. 12,000 people died, including my daughter and my. That act was the final cruelty in 3 centuries of cruelty. It was the moment humanity decided that enough was enough. He looked at the planet through the window. "We came here with fire and rage. We fought battles that should have been impossible. We lost friends, family, pieces of ourselves that we will never get back. We earned the right to stand where we stand now, with the power to destroy thee and everyone on it." The fleet waited. The galaxy listened. 18 billion people live on Prime, continued. Most of them have never hurt anyone. Most of them are just ordinary people, parents trying to raise children, workers trying to earn a living, young people trying to find their place in the universe. They did not choose this war. They did not kill the passengers of the Chrysanthemum. They are not our enemies. He felt something shift inside him. Something that had been frozen for 2 years began to thaw. "We could destroy them. We have earned that right. They taught us that power is all that matters, and now we have the power. We could use it. We could end them." He shook his head slowly. "But we won't." The bridge was absolutely silent. On worlds across the galaxy, people stopped what they were doing to listen. "We won't," repeated, "because we remember who we were before they forced us to become this. We were builders, teachers, healers. We sent doctors to cure plagues. We sent engineers to save failing stations. We spent 3 centuries being kind because we believed that kindness had value." His voice grew stronger. "They tried to burn that out of us. They thought that if they hurt us enough, we would become like them, cold, cruel, caring about nothing but power. They were wrong." He thought about, she had believed in peace. She had believed that humanity could be better than its enemies. He hoped she would understand. "The war ends today," he said. "They will return every prisoner they have taken. They will pay reparations to every family they destroyed. They will stand before the galaxy and confess what they did. And they will spend the next 1,000 years remembering that humans had the power to destroy them and chose not to." He looked at the planet one last time. "That is the difference between us. That is what the galaxy will remember. Not that we could kill them, that we chose not to." He cut the transmission. The bridge was still silent. Then slowly Captain spoke. "Sir, the High Council is asking to speak with you directly." "Put them through." A holographic image appeared on the bridge. A elder, his gray skin wrinkled with age, his 4 arms hanging at his sides. He looked broken, defeated in a way that went beyond military loss. "Admiral Park," the elder said. His voice was quiet, uncertain. We did not expect." "You expected us to destroy you," said. "You thought we would do what you would have done." "Yes." Nodded. "I considered it. I wanted it. For 2 years I dreamed of this moment, but then I realized something." What? If I destroyed your world, I would become you. Everything I hate about your species, the cruelty, the arrogance, the belief that power justifies anything, I would take it into myself, and I am not willing to pay that price. The elder was silent. Your people took my daughter from me, continued. They took thousands of other daughters and sons and mothers and fathers. I cannot forgive that. I will never forgive that. He met the elder's eyes. But I can choose not to become a monster. That choice is mine. You cannot take it from me. The elder bowed his head. It was a gesture had never seen him make before. We accept your terms, the elder said, all of them, and, for what it is worth, I am sorry. Not as a representative of my people, as an individual, I am sorry for what we did to you. It was not enough, it would never be enough, but it was something. Then let us end this, said. The surrender was signed within the hour. They released their prisoners. They began the process of paying reparations. They stood before the Galactic Council and confessed their crimes. The galaxy watched in amazement. For the first time in recorded history, a species had won total victory and chosen mercy. Months later, a young historian named traveled to Earth. He wanted to understand humans. He wanted to know why they had made the choice they made. He found Ambassador Bay sitting in a garden in Seoul, watching cherry blossoms fall from the trees. She was older now, her hair fully gray, but her eyes were still sharp. "May I ask you something, Ambassador?" said. "Of course." "Why did you spare us? You had every right to destroy our world, every justification. Why didn't you?" Watch the cherry blossoms for a long moment. "Your people thought we were soft because we preferred peace," she said. "You never understood. We prefer peace because we know what we're capable of. Every human carries the capacity for violence. We've spent our entire history learning to choose otherwise." She turned to look at him. "You didn't cross a line when you destroyed the chrysanthemum. You erased the line completely, and we showed you exactly what that meant." She paused. "We also showed you that even after everything, after hate, after grief, after 2 years of watching our people die, we could rebuild the line." Was silent for a long time. "I think I understand," he said finally. "It wasn't mercy, it was strength." Smiled. "It was both. The strongest thing a person can do is choose not to use their power to hurt others. Your people taught us that power matters. We taught you that how you use it matters more." She looked up at the sky. "That is what makes us dangerous, not that we fight, that we can stop." The historian left Earth with more questions than answers, but he carried one truth with him that he would never forget. The humans had stood at the edge of the abyss. They had looked down at the darkness, and they had chosen to walk away. That choice, that moment of grace in the midst of rage, would define humanity for centuries to come, not as the species that won the war, but as the species that could have destroyed everything and chose not to. In the end, that was the victory that truly mattered. On Earth, Admiral Park retired to a small house by the sea. He lived quietly, tending a garden, watching the waves. Sometimes, on clear nights, he looked up at the stars and thought about Minu, about Sora. He hoped they would be proud. He thought they would be. And on clear nights, when the stars were bright and the sea was calm, he could almost hear them telling him that he had done the right thing. That was enough. That would always be enough.